Hey everyone, this is Keith Baker. I am the host of the Dancing with Cancer podcast, where we talk about how to live an upbeat, joyful life in the middle of the cancer storm. Let's go. Hey everyone, this is Keith Baker with the Dancing with Cancer podcast, episode 33, Freedom from the Prison Called Freedom. And we'll jump into that in just a few minutes. Before we do that, let's, real quick, I just wanted to share, give you an update again that Mildred Parton, my mother-in-law, please continue to keep her in your prayers. She does seem to be getting better, but it's just been a slow process. Again, she was in the hospital, I think about a week and a half ago with COVID, was in there almost a full week. And now she is back home and she's recuperating. But in theory, she because of COVID, no one's supposed to visit her for 2 weeks. She can't have anybody in the house for 2 weeks. And I know for her that's hard because she's a very social person. And so we're just praying that she gets healed and restored and able to go back to her normal living lifestyle. I also ask you to please keep Kathy in your prayers as well. Again, the cancer diagnosis and everything that came with it, I think if I'm being honest, has been a lot harder on her than it is even on me. And I think she carries the weight of trying to take care of me because I'm not smart enough to take care of myself or whatever. But I think she just worries a lot about me and the medications and the long-term impacts of different things. And I know, so anyways, just keep her in your prayers, if you will. I know this situation with her mother really made it hard, and that's her mom, and she's scared for her mom, and she wants to do as much as she can for her mom, but then again, she's afraid of bringing something home to me, getting the COVID and bringing it home, and then me getting COVID with my weakened immune system and what that might lead to and that kind of thing. And so I think she feels pinched between trying to do what's right for her mom and trying to do what's right for me and, and that kind of thing. So just keep her in your prayers as well. That would be greatly appreciated. So this week's episode, again, we're in this series about freedom, this conversation we've been having about freedom, what it means. We think of the passages where it says that where the Spirit is, there is freedom, and the truth will set you free. You will know the truth, and the truth will set you free. And those types of verses have kind of laid the groundwork for this series in this conversation that we've been having about freedom and what it looks like and those types of things. And so if you haven't had a chance to listen to some of the previous ones, please go back and check those out. This week is freedom from the prison called freedom. And I know what I want to share in my heart, but I'm not sure if I'll be able to verbalize it in a way that would make sense to everyone else. So here goes. We'll give it our best shot. So I believe that our culture, there's a lot of things that we learn inherently as children growing up in our modern culture that's not like anyone specifically intentional in trying to teach us this. It's just kind of the certain mindsets and concepts that it seems like everybody agrees to, or it just seems like is woven into the fabric of our society. And that's kind of what we want to talk about today. So here's a quote that I read this past week, and I know it's kind of wordy, so I'm going to read it to you, and then I want to kind of break it down and talk about how this has kind of become a part of American society, and at least from my viewpoint, a big part of who we are and what drives us. And many of us may not even recognize the role that it plays in our life. So anyways, the quote was, self-fulfillment is the pinnacle of existence, and therefore self-gratification is the apex of freedom. Self-fulfillment is the pinnacle of existence, and therefore self-gratification is the apex of freedom. And I know what some of you are thinking, like, whoa, 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 what are you talking about here? What are you talking about? But I think it's a mindset, a belief system that many people have either consciously or maybe subconsciously, and they don't really recognize it for what it is. I think basically, if you want to push it down the nuts and bolts or grind it down the nuts and bolts, it's basically just saying that there's this idea out there that what provides me with self fulfillment should be the most important thing in my life. And I should do whatever I want to do, whenever I want to do it, however I want to do it. I should have the freedom to be me, the freedom to do whatever I want to do, whenever I want to do it, with whom I want to do it. And if that leads to my self fulfillment and my self gratification, then that's good. And I believe some people have bought into this so strongly that it actually becomes a prison for them. And it almost always leads down a path that's not healthy or helpful. It actually hurts them in the long run. 2 Peter 2:19, they promise them freedom while they themselves are slaves of depravity. For people are slaves to whatever has mastered them. They promise them freedom while they themselves are slaves of depravity. For people are slaves to whatever has mastered them. I think this verse is telling us that everybody is a slave to something. And it's just a matter of what is it that you're a slave to. And so it may be a conscious thing that you're aware of, or it may be a subconscious thing that you're not aware of. But there are things or people or something that is a master to you and you're a slave to, whether you recognize it or not. You can pretend it's not there, but it's there. We all are slaves to something. And that verse says people are slaves to whatever has mastered them, whatever controls them, whatever motivates them. So I guess the question we have to ask ourselves, why do we do the things that we do? What is it that pushes us, that requires us to do certain things? Why do we react the way we react in certain situations? What is it that drives us? And if you find out what it is that drives us, oftentimes you'll find out what it is that masters us. The tragic irony is that what is elevated as the height of freedom by our culture is in fact the darkest of dungeons, and the supposed path to self-fulfillment leads to utter destruction. Another one of those quotes that are like, whoa, let me take a minute and just let it soak in for a minute and kind of break it down a little bit. The tragic irony is that what is elevated as the height of freedom by our culture is in fact the darkest of dungeons, and the supposed path to self-fulfillment leads to utter destructions. Maybe a better way to put it is Proverbs 14:12. It simply says, there is a path before each person that seems right, but it ends in death. There is a path. There is a way. There is a choice to be made. Which path am I going down? And a lot of times in our physical minds, and our logical minds, and our, dare I say it, our selfish minds, sometimes, we believe that because Adam and Eve sinned, we're born with a sin nature, and that this sin nature is an inclination to sin. That we are born with this inclination to sin, and it makes us inherently selfish if left to our own desires. That's why oftentimes with babies, 6-month-old, a year old, they'll take a toy away from the other baby. It's not that they've been taught to take the toy away. They just want the toy. But both of them want the toy because that's the inherent nature, human nature. I want it. I want it. as adults, hopefully, we can get beyond that. And I think that's what we're trying to address here is that um, mentality in our modern culture that says whatever leads to my fulfillment, my self fulfillment, whatever is best for me, that's okay. That's good. And I should pursue those things. And no one has a right to tell me that that's wrong. And I do agree that we live in America where you have the freedoms to do anything you want to do. And you can choose to do anything you want to do. But it doesn't mean that that's what's best for you. And that's the challenge here is I'm not trying to take anyone's rights away. I'm just trying to challenge your way of thinking, or maybe help you see it through a different lens and recognize that maybe built within that lie is a trap. That, hey, if we can go down this path far enough, by the time the trap is set and closes on us, it's too late to get back and figure things out. So what does this look like in the real world? Sometimes we talk about things in a theoretical, this should, shouldn't, would, wouldn't, but I always want to take scripture and apply it to real life and see how does this work in the real world. So come this December, Kathy and I will be celebrating 45 years of marriage. The 45th anniversary that she's put up with me and all my nonsense. Very simply, that if we had that mentality, our marriage would have never lasted. If I'm being frank, at times, I mean, it barely lasted with both of us loving each other, both of us being very committed to each other and very committed to God. It was still a struggle at times. Now, again, I love her desperately. She loves me. It's not her. It's probably me. But we're human. Again, two different humans from two different family backgrounds. We're trying to figure life out and trying to feel things through. But just imagine if my number one goal is to make me happy, to do what makes me feel good, to worry about my needs all the time, and her number one goal is to make her happy and to take care and meet all of her goals all the time, then there's going to be this tug of war going on in the marriage. And I have to believe that this is at least a contributing factor to the fact that almost one in every two marriages end in divorce. That either one or both members at some point come to the place where they want their own fulfillment, desires, things more than they want to make the partner happy. So ideally, if you're in a marriage, the two become one flesh. And so your goal becomes, I truly want what's best for Kathy. I truly want her to be happy. I truly go out of my way to try to meet her needs in a sacrificing way at times. And she does the same for me. She goes out of the way to do things for me just to be nice, to love me and show that she loves me in ways that she knows I appreciate. And so, yes, it takes intentional activity. You got to think about these things. You have to plan for these things at times. And it's hard at times. But if I am always giving 100% or as much as I can in the moment to try to make her happy, and if she's going out of her way to try to make me happy, then we both end up happy in the long run. But if I'm always trying to make me happy and she's always trying to make her happy, trying to meet her needs, trying to put her priorities over my priorities. I'm trying to put my priorities in front of her priorities. There's going to be this constant struggle. And sooner or later, one or the other wins out. And sometimes one domineers while the other is just crushed. And they just live that way. And that's not healthy, or the way it should be. So this idea that I want to do whatever's best for me, that gives self-fulfillment to me, is 100% against marriage. It would be so destructive to marriage. And that's just one example in real life, how when you take this philosophy and you live it out in the real world, it just doesn't work. We all have limitations. We all have boundaries. And for a healthy society to work, there has to be laws. There has to be boundaries. And if you cross those lines, if you cross those boundaries, there has to be punishments. And I mean, in theory, if you take that to the nth degree and say, hey, whatever I want, and I want it whenever I want it, wherever I want it, however I want it, with whoever I want it, it means literally I could walk into a store and just take stuff. Well, people are doing that now in our society and culture. And in some cases, they're getting away with it because our leaders have gotten so confused. They don't really understand. There's no absolute rights and wrong. They've got nothing that becomes a benchmark for them because they don't have any defining guidelines for that. They've walked away from God and they've said, in the public square, whatever God says or doesn't apply. It's whatever you think is right versus whatever he thinks is right versus whatever she thinks is right. And there's no benchmark. There's no anchor. There's nothing that says, oh, this is always right and this is always wrong. And so then it's up to the individual to decide what is right and what is wrong, what is truth and what isn't truth. And now we're seeing the chaos that causes in our nation right now, the absolute confusion that are in a lot of people's lives in our school systems. We're seeing that kind of philosophy lived out for now. I believe the second generation. I believe this started in the 1960s, and it's just kind of snowballed and grown. And at first it was just kind of a small radical group, but now it's infiltrated our education system. It's infiltrated our mainstream culture in many ways. So this world, our modern culture says, if it feels good, do it. If it brings you pleasure, engage in it. It's good. It's no one can tell you not to do it. No one can tell you it's wrong to do it. No one has say over your life except for you. Whatever pleases you, do it. Now, Scripture, compared to that, 2 Corinthians 5:15 says, and he died for all, that those who live should no longer live for themselves, but for him who died for them and was raised again. So on the one side, it says, whatever I want, that's what I want. I want it. If it feels good, do it. Pleasure yourself. That's the highest goal. While the other side, God says, and he died for all, that those who live should no longer live for themselves, but for him who died and was raised again. And this verse defines my life, I hope. that I no longer live for Keith Baker. I literally live for Jesus Christ. I've committed my life. I've committed my career. I've committed my marriage. I've committed my life to him the best I know how. The greatest irony is that I finally found freedom by becoming a slave to God. Now that sounds like a contradiction on the surface, and many people in our culture would freak out if they heard you say that because they don't understand how it works. Literally by dying to self. I have found more pleasure for myself by by focusing on helping others, focusing on loving others, doing what I can for my children, for my wife, for my family, for my friends, for my coworkers, going out of the way to love people and help others has brought me more joy and satisfaction than all the times that I was pursuing joy and satisfaction for myself. So it really it seems contrary to what seems normal, but it is the way it works in the real world. The greatest irony is that I finally found freedom by becoming a slave to God. Freedom from insecurities, from peer pressure, from the lure of self gratification, from greed, anger, hate, fear, self loathing, addiction, the need to be first, free at last from all of these things that had haunted me a good portion of my life in various degrees, in different ways. Again, addiction, the need to be first. How many people have addictions now because they gave into that motto? Hey, I want to do whatever I want to do. I want to be free to be me and do whatever I want to do. And so they did, and they became addicted to sex, drugs, alcohol, and their lives were ruined in the process. Their lives became a prison. This freedom to do whatever they want to do became an addiction and became a prison for them. My dad literally never knew his dad because of alcohol addiction. He saw him, I think, 2 times, maybe 3 times. I'm not sure exactly, but he never knew him in the way I knew my dad, right? Because of alcohol addiction, the freedoms became a prison for his father. And it not only ruined his father's life, but then ruined or had a horrible impact, I should say, on my dad's life. Didn't ruin my dad's life. God salvaged the harm that was done in that situation. This freedom, this prison called freedom, this lie, this bait that Satan uses to draw us in to the trap, is this idea, this concept that I have to do certain things to keep my own autonomy, to keep my own freedom. I want to be boss of my life. I want to be in charge. I know what's best for me. All of these things revolve around this thing, and they become a prison for us. They cause harm to us, to our family, to our children. And then you see the flip side of the coin. And he died for all, that those who live should no longer live for themselves, but for him who died for them and was raised again. So Eve was promised the world. She was given a piece of fruit, and she lost the garden. Maybe we should focus more on the consequences and what we could lose, instead of focusing on what we are going to gain or what is promised, the false promise. You know, the glittery thing that's in front of us, the shiny thing. Says, oh, that looks so good. I wonder if Eve, if the serpent would have told Eve, oh, by the way, when you eat this fruit, your relationship with God is going to change forevermore. You will no longer be able to walk with God in the garden and experience his presence in the same way that you do right now. As a matter of fact, you're going to be kicked out of the garden. You're going to lose the garden too, as well. And there's this thing called physical pain. I know you don't know what that means right now, but that's going to come with this also. And then there's sickness and illness. Again, I get it. You don't understand what these things are. You've never experienced these things. But that comes with the package as well. And then there's one more minor detail that, one of your sons is going to kill his brother. And it's going to lead to the worst day in your life. do you think if she understood where this path was leading, that she'd still go down this path? Do you think if Eve understood the actual consequences to her decision, would she have made that decision? Of course not. Of course not. But isn't that the way he works, Satan? He's a liar. He comes to steal, kill, and destroy. His deception is what gives him power. And so he tells us the only thing matters is your own happiness. Whatever makes you feel good. I just want to have fun. I just want to have, I just want to do this for me. Alcohol abuse, alcoholism, and alcohol use disorder kill over 3 million people each year, accounting for up to 6% of global deaths. 3 million people every year die because of alcohol abuse in one form or another. And that doesn't even address the people who are living. How many marriages have been destroyed because of alcoholism? How many children grew up in violent situations, being physically abused because of alcoholism? And I believe the large majority of those who are doing the abusing hate themselves. They hate themselves for what they've become. And yet they're trapped in this prison of alcoholism or drug abuse or sexual addiction. And they feel like they're no longer in control. And now their spouse and their children are paying the price for their choices. Over 96,000 people die from drug overdoses in a year in the United States. The opioid epidemic causes 136 deaths every day in the U.S. That means every day when you get up in the morning, 136 families are going to find out that their son, their daughter, their brother, their sister, maybe their mom or their dad has died of opioid crisis, of drug abuse. No one says, you know what? My goal one day is to become an alcoholic. My goal one day is to become strung out on drugs and no longer have control of my life. My goal one day is to fill in the blank. No, they're promised this false promise, this glittery thing. Just engage in your own pleasures. Do what you want to do. Have fun today. And let tomorrow take care of tomorrow. Don't worry about tomorrow. Just have fun today. What about physical prisons? You ever wonder why there are people in physical prisons? What got them there? Right? I mean, usually they stole something. They were involved in violence. They killed somebody, murdered somebody. Again, if you track most of those down back to the source, it comes back to the same lie. The same idea, the same concept of whatever I want is most important. That I'm going to take care of numero uno, myself. And it starts transforming the way you think, and all of a sudden it's okay to do certain things. And it's not like it happens overnight for most people. It's like there's multiple layers where you accept here and you go from point A to point B, and then you accept a little more and you go to point C, and you accept a little more and you go to point D, and before you know it, you're a completely different person. And in most cases, you start reaping the results of your poor choices, and it pushes you to a more extreme position where now you have to react or overreact, and you end up killing someone or you have an affair and you get caught. Now you got to respond to that, or you kill your spouse. The first person who's investigated when someone is murdered is the spouse, because that's happens so often. Maybe when these shiny things are put out in front of us, when it looks so good, and just this one time, I just want to do something for me. I want to that we think about the consequences. We think about not what's being promised, what we're gaining, but we think about what we might lose if we go down that path. Love you guys. Thanks so much for stopping in. Please hit the like, the subscribe, and the bell, and we will see you again next week. Adios.